Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Prabneek Sidhu, and I am one of the 2023-24 BSA co-presidents. I am also a fourth-year Bachelor of Accounting co-op student here at Goodman. I would like to begin this gathering by acknowledging the land on which Brock University was built is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to work and live here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and acknowledging reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous peoples. It's a pleasure to have you all here today on the first day of summer, as well as National Indigenous Peoples Day. Today marks our third annual Indigenous Leader Speaker Series, a collaboration between the Goodman School of Business and the Indigenous Engagement Office at Brock University. This speaker series is not only an important opportunity for us to amplify the voices of Indigenous business leaders, but also a chance for you to hear firsthand from a leader committed to doing business in a socially and environmentally sustainable way. Today's conversation will feature Dr. Robyn Bourgeois and Karen MacKenzie. I encourage you to submit any questions you have via the chat box, which is located next to the live stream window. On that note, I am delighted to introduce Dr. Robyn Bourgeois, who will be leading today's conversation with Karen. Dr. Robyn Bourgeois is Brock University's Vice-Provost, Indigenous Engagement. She is a mixed-race Cree woman whose Cree family comes from Treaty 8 territory. She was born and raised in Syilx and Splatsin territories of British Columbia and is connected through her 3 children to the 6 nations of the Grand River. She's an associate professor in the Center for Women's and Gender Studies at Brock, where her scholarly work focuses on Indigenous feminisms, violence against Indigenous women and girls, and Indigenous women's political activism and leadership. In addition to being an academic, Robyn is also an activist, author, and artist. Without any further delay, please welcome Dr. Robyn Bourgeois.
Tansei, thank you, Prabneek, for that wonderful introduction, and thank you for opening and kicking off this third Indigenous Speaker Series. I'm so grateful for you, and I'm so grateful for everyone watching. And this is such an important day. I want to start by saying Happy Indigenous Peoples Day. And as I've been saying for Indigenous folks, today I've been saying it's a good day to be Indigenous and celebrate this wonderful day. And I can't think of a better way to celebrate than to get to spend the next hour talking to one of my favorite people in the whole world. I will tell you, I just took a leadership class and I was doing a lot of reflection in that class. And one of the things I realized was that I had never heard in my entire childhood that I was a gift to this world. And the first person that ever told me that was this lovely person I'm sitting with today, Karen MacKenzie. And it was one of the most impactful gifts I've ever been given in my life. And a friend recently asked, what is something that comforts you? And what is one of the nicest, most comforting things you've ever heard? And that was what I replied, was you were a gift to this world. And I often repeat it. There's so much I can say about Karen. She is a raven trickster, and I'm proud to sit alongside her in a conspiracy of matriarchs. She is Cree and Métis, and we actually have connections. We discovered through our journey that Karen's mom and my grandfather went to the same residential school, Gerard Residential School. Karen is magical. That's all I'm going to say. There are so many formal qualifications I can list, but this is a magical human being that once she walks into your life, nothing is the same. And she once used that same phrasing about me, so I really relish that. She is an entrepreneur. She has been an educator. She is a mentor to so many people. She works with governments. She works with agencies. She works with universities. And on top of all of that, she is a mother and a grandmother. This is one of my favorite people in the whole world, and someone I love so deeply. And I'm so honored to get to spend tonight sitting and chatting with my most beloved elder. This is what I call you. I hope you know that. My friend and my sister, Karen MacKenzie. So welcome, Karen.
Thank you. Kinanescmatan, I'm grateful. Oh, just if I have given you joy by saying you are a gift to the world, your introduction has come back to me 100-fold. It's just so wonderful. And without scripting, just to welcome our guests here tonight, it's really about relationships. And this is how we talk about relationships. It's about things that come from here, not from here. You know, not our degrees and not our, vitae that says I've done this and that. But you can get to that through good stories. And you were talking about entrepreneur, educator and so on. And I thought, this time last month, I had steel-toed boots on, and I was at an open pit gold mine in the Tahltan territory. And if you don't know where that is, I flew from Edmonton to Whitehorse and then drove 7 hours straight into northern British Columbia. And the Tahltan Nation is larger than Switzerland. So that's just gives you an inkling of the size of, this country, our nations, and how we can all work together to just make magical things happen. And sometimes you don't know what it is. So if you go in with a script and something happens, you're hooped, and so if you go in with the intent to meet some wonderful people, acknowledge the land where you're at, and you just start to take in things. And when things don't go well, as in this situation, which was, projected to be an easy go in, do this, and then fly home. Well, no. But now you know what the challenges are, what the big opportunities are, and the solutions that were projected before we went would get you maybe just a little bit here, but now that we've met everyone, the solutions can be just beyond what people think about. And I think that worldview that Indigenous people bring to business and to living is very powerful, and that's what we're looking forward to. And I have been in your territory, and it's magical, and it's so very different from where I live, and so we acknowledge it, and so we give thanks. So while Pravnik did a land acknowledgement to talk about living on this territory, when I come to visit, I come as a visitor. And I acknowledge that I am a visitor. And I would offer tobacco, as is my custom, and to say thank you for receiving me as a guest. And, no different than if you go to if you're invited to someone's house for dinner, that you acknowledge that you're a guest, and we start those magical relationships, and they stick with you forever. And again, it'll be something where you say, I remember Robyn talking about something. I'm going to give her a call because she could probably help me here. And so it's just a wonderful journey. And to our audience that might be thinking, so when are you going to get to the points that you want to make?
They don't know us.
Well, I'm going to share a story. I took one of my elders, the late Nellie Carlson. And, you know, she was one of the fierce women elders from across Canada that, you know, had lost their status. So they couldn't be Indians anymore. And so they, you know, they fought Bill C-35 to regain their status. And Nellie is about 5 feet tall. And I took her over to the University of Alberta one day to the Faculty of Education. And she was going to share some teachings, and she was going to share our sacred laws. You might have heard of them as grandfather teachings and so on. And she says there's 7 of them. And one of the professors said, "Do you mind if I write these down?" And Nellie looked at her and said, "You mean with all your education, you can't remember 7 things?" To which I went, ouch, you know, oops. Maybe I wanted to write them down, but no, not going there. And then she said, "What I really want you to do is just listen." And she said, "If you only remember one thing, that's what you were supposed to remember. That's the one thing that spoke to you. So you don't go home with, you know, your notebook or on your tablet that says 7 points. These are the things. And, you know, aren't I smart that I know them?" And again, so that's been a teaching has stuck with me, is just really learn to listen. And you're not busy taking notes, because that's only such a small part. And when you take notes, you're not really listening. And so we sit. So I recently did a leadership course at the University of Alberta. And
look at this.
What's the agenda? And I said, "Come and see." "Well, what do we bring? You know, give me your PowerPoints and we'll get them ready." I said, "There are no PowerPoints." And, you know, bring nothing. Bring yourselves. And so we had the best time ever. And, you know, at the end of it, they had a week-long different sessions. I just did a small part. And that was the part that stuck with them, partly because they had to engage, you know, in such a good way. And when we talk about agendas, I think of another elder that I have, who's the late Narcisse Blood, Blackfoot elder from the Blood tribe. And when I asked him the question about agendas, he says, "Here's the agenda. We're going to start and we're going to finish. And in between, we're going to do stuff. And we're probably going to have coffee or tea, something to eat." But he said, "You have to create space for magic to happen." So I share that with you. You know, don't over prepare. Don't fill it all up. What if we don't have enough to talk about in an hour? You will, as things start to happen. So, you know, I'm grateful that Robyn introduced the word magic, because now she lobbed it to me and I'm lobbing it back to her. Because magic is all around us.
Yeah.
And we have to have our senses open to see it and to be aware of it.
It's funny that we're talking about magic, because I was just recently watching a TV show called Yellow Jackets, and they use a Buffy St. Marie song that I had never heard before about, and it's, you know, God is alive, magic is afoot. And I've been so taken with the song and her reading of magic, and that it's everywhere, and that it doesn't die, and it's not an end, it's just an existence. And I feel like so much of what, at least what I've seen of you do and what you and I have done together, that's the only way to describe it, is pure magic.
Yeah. And so I'm going to throw that challenge out to the audience. You know, what is the magic in your life? And it could be the birth of a child. You know, it could be a wonderful dinner. All of these things. It could be, you know, flowers in bloom. All of these things. And, you know, as soon as I said flowers in bloom, I'm thinking the wild roses in Alberta, at least in the Edmonton area in Treaty 6, they bloomed in May. Now, they don't normally bloom till July. So I cannot say they normally bloom anymore. I mean, they bloom, but everything has changed. And so in the business world, nothing is going to be the same. So learning to deal with that uncertainty is really an important skill. And, you know, we suffer so much right now from anxiety and depression about the state of our world. But just to think about, what can we do? What action can we take to make some changes? Because changes are afoot. They're all around us. And I don't know if it's a Buffy song, but magic is all around. There's another song that has changes. And, you know, our teachings, and I wore this medicine wheel pendant, and I wanted to just share some teachings about change. And so, you know, you can't go back. You always keep going in that circle. My community, Treaty 6, we always go clockwise. So we talk about the days. So we cannot recover yesterday. So if it was the best day of your life, well, today you get a chance to make it an even better day. Or because we can't go backwards, what we say, the teaching from yesterday is wisdom. What did we learn? What did we learn? And today is about gratitude. And I've heard Robyn say it many times in her introductions about she's grateful, gratitude. So we never say just thank you and be done. We say we're grateful because it is spoken to our heart, to our spirit. So wisdom from yesterday, gratitude is the teaching from today, and then tomorrow is about hope. So what are we looking forward to? And so when we talk about, you know, visioning, strategic plans, that kind of thing, what are we looking forward to? What have we learned? What's happening today? And if you try and put it all together, it's going to be a little bit of a challenge. And I remember doing some strategic planning, and I don't do very much of that anymore, at least in that, you know, traditional term. And I remember an elder, you know, she's probably in her 80s. She called me over at the break and she says, "What's a strategy?" And I thought, you know, you just nailed it. Number one, we put names on things and we don't really know what they mean. Or we're trying to, say, take a Western approach and assume everyone else knows what it is. So that's also part of that process of decolonization, because we've all been colonized, whether you're Indigenous or not, because we've been educated the same way, we've heard the same stories, and so on. And now we're all struggling, fighting to tell the bigger truth, that the stories don't go like this. There's many, many. And, you know, and then we're fighting against those who live by fear. And so don't want those stories told. So another one of my beautiful elders, and her name's Betty Latender, she taught me many years ago the longest journey, and this is when I'm sitting down to receive, you know, my learning, my other education from her. She said, the biggest journey you're going to go on, if you choose to go this way, is from here to here. Not very far, but here is where fear lives. Here is where we always say how much, how long, what if, and the risk. We do risk assessments. We go and do, you know, We panic. We want to put things in order so that we can understand them. If we start to think with our heart, we think with love, we think with kindness, and this is where motivation lives. Get a big strategic plan, up here, and then go do it, and everyone is like, no. But when people see its meaning, it speaks to them, it speaks to their heart, then they're motivated to do it. And you can tell we probably need both, back. And it doesn't matter where you start from. If you start from here with the how much, how long, this is the project management mentality. I won't say mentality, project management perspective. They have questions. And here they may start with something totally different. They're going to say, we're going to start with ceremony. We're going to start with just getting to know each other. We're just going to have dinner together. And then we'll figure it out. Project management says, well, that's taken a week off our deadline, etc. But if what we're finding is when you build the relationships, if something goes wrong, you'll figure it out together, as opposed to letting the courts figure it out, or litigation, or work shutdowns like strikes and so on. So again, we need both.
It's interesting. I've actually, when I've done teachings with people, I can see sometimes the struggle. Like I can literally physically see it on them as they're trying to get out of their head and get down to their heart. And I can see it when, for some people, it's too scary. So they're like, no, I can't do this. Right? Or then I can see people really trying to get out of their head, and then when it clicks and you see the magic, it's a kind of an incredible thing to get to observe. Exactly.
And it's like, if I leave here, I won't get a gold star.
Yes. Yeah.
And this is where creativity lives, and innovation, which is what are the skills that we need in this contemporary world. And so that's that push-pull. And so it's engaging, and it's, I'll have to say, fun. I mean, if I can't have fun, I don't want to go there. I don't want to go there. And, maybe I have a perverse sense of what's fun, because sometimes it's pushing boundaries, but having, seeing a group of people come alive, that sometimes they have found their voice. And so I'll come back to the circle, but I do a lot of decolonizing work. And I'm going to ask everyone in the audience, and only you can see yourselves maybe, is to put your hands like this in a triangle. And this is the Western hierarchical model, where we have a few people at the top and the rest of us are down here. And if we're good and prosperous and we get things done, maybe we can move up. Now, if you take your top fingers, keep your thumbs together and move the top away from you, like so, you'll see your hands have formed a circle. And this is the Indigenous perspective. And what it means is it's ever organic. It can expand, it can contract, but it means that everyone gets in this, or everyone gets to be there. So we talk about diversity and inclusion like it's a new thing. It's always been our way, that you needed every voice in there, because everyone has a gift. Everyone has a genius. And part of it is to understand what your own genius is, but to also recognize that others have it. So when we talk about gender diversity, it's always been there. And within our circle, we always want to make sure we have male, female, gender diverse, two-spirit. We want elders, we want youth, we want people who are good at, say, writing proposals in this day and age, those that are good at, working with governments and so on, so that you build this whole group of people, a team. It's a community where you have the diversity of thinking and experience and perspective that you need. And this is where the word co-creation comes from.
Yes.
And if you don't have good relationships in that circle, the challenges will be enormous.
Exactly.
And that's when, plans go sideways, because this group is going to put their foot down and not play. And, it's like, I've heard people say, so, I'm having a hard time because I've been asked at work to put my pronouns in my email signature. And she said, I don't understand, and it makes me uncomfortable. And I said, well, number one, it's not about you. It's about making people feel safe in this circle. And how do we do that? We acknowledge who they are, what their gifts are. And again, that's the other one, a trauma-free, safe space. That circle is sacred. And that is where you can be who you are and be safe. So these are things that we start to change our perspectives. And how do you teach this is really, is a challenge, because oftentimes the people who are teaching it, they have to get there first, because they can't put it up as a PowerPoint. And so sometimes team teaching comes into play, all kinds of innovative things start happening when this is the other thing up here. This is where ego lives.
Yes.
The big fat ego. Well, someone will think I'm not smart if I share a concern that I have, or that I ask them to come into the classroom. And then they're going to see me, yeah. So we want to get rid of ego and get into that kindness, love, and to which I will always have, a gentleman that worked for a provincial government say, we don't do love here. We don't do what brings you joy. We don't do delight, joy, all of those words. They don't belong here. And it was interesting because the ravens in his group, I could see them light up and say, oh, so you don't do delight. Well, we'll just start using this in our language because it's going to bring someone else in and help them.
Yep. I love that idea of the gifts. It was something our friend Kitty Lickers said to me one time, because I'm one of those people, because of trauma, I take on everything myself. And she once looked at me and she said, you know what? You don't have to know everything. You have to know people who know things and have the wisdom to bring them together. And that clicked for me. That was a moment that was like, oh my gosh, you're so right. This is how we do this. And that diversity of perspective is so critical to being successful. We can't do this alone. We were never intended to do things alone.
Exactly. And when you sit in that circle, and I'll use, I'll say the First Nations model of a chief. That's the chief's job, not to know everything, but to have the right people in that circle. And the other thing is let go so that others can do and learn. And I always remember my grandmother, who was one of the really important teachers in my life. She always said to me, stop asking so many questions. Just watch and listen. And then she would say, now you do it. And I'd be, oh, I forgot that part. And and she would never yell at me. She would just kindly help me along, knowing that that's the process. And, you know, I try to do that, but, you know, sometimes I am only a human being. You know, you get a little frustrated and you want to hurry someone along as opposed to letting them do that. I'll share an important story of one of the best teachers I ever had. I was berry picking with my kukum, my grandmother, and aunties, and a bunch of women from the community. And, you know, my dad was in the Air Force, so I moved all around, and I was in a, you know, pretty straight-laced, you know, cultural. So when I went to spend summers with my grandmother, it was a different kind of learning and the fun time. So we all load up in a couple of pickup trucks, and seatbelts weren't invented then. And we drove through the bush. We drove down through a little river, across the river, and we got to the other side. We picked berries. We made a fire. We ate. We had a nap. You know, it was just a beautiful day. And then when we got ready to come home, one of the trucks was stuck in the sand. And, you know, the wheels were spinning. And I thought, uh-oh, how am I going to get hold of my father? Because my dad could do everything. You know, he could fix, you name it. And I'm thinking, how's this going to happen? And while I'm standing there worried, these women are going and getting pieces of wood, and they have a shovel in the truck, and they dig under the wheel, put the wood in there, and boom. And I said, oh, so we didn't need my dad. There was a problem, and they just fixed it themselves. And I said, okay. And for me, that piece of learning has stood me in good stead. You know, I don't want to feel helpless, though there might be a moment where you guys kind of go, oh, dang, you know, this is... And then take a deep breath and say, okay, what do we need? How can we do this? Who's around? Who can help? And so on. And, you know, and then all of a sudden there might be new relationships while you're talking with this person. You find out they're this, and you just say, wow, let me take your particulars, and we might have a conversation. So again, and another teaching that has stayed with me is everything is important. Everything has meaning. You know, I do some teachings around animals, with animals, and you know, I asked a friend, a Blackfoot woman. She was passing cards out so that people were going to introduce themselves, and I asked her to pick one for me, and she picked the pronghorn antelope, which is really only in her territory in Treaty 7. Fastest animal in the Western Hemisphere. And guess where the fastest animal number one is the cheetah in the other hemisphere. And its original prey, the antelope, was on this side, and as continents move. But anyway, so every time I open my book, I have that antelope looking at me, and it reminds me of my friend, and it reminds me, you know, of the elder that I mentioned earlier, Narcisse Blood, and all of these. You get energy, you know, they speak to you. They'll give you a tap on the shoulder and say, remember, you know, you've got this. And you say,
you know, it's actually, for me, your medicine wheel teachings around the animals has been such a profound impact on my life. And I say this to everybody every time I talk about it, because it gives you a framework for how to think about the world and it gives you not only your own leadership model, but it helps you build those relationships with the other animals that you have to work with. And I found that, and it sticks with me because it's through animals, as opposed to, saying, this is this fancy leadership style and this is this, because it's so brilliant and practical.
Yeah. And you don't need a piece of paper to remind you.
Yeah.
And just to let you know that I do have that antelope card here.
I love it.
So again, many, many ways. And, and I'm going to say, I think we really need to talk about change, and I watch, we don't have cottontail rabbits. We have the big snowshoe hares.
Yes.
And like the other rabbits, they change color. Well, they all turned white many weeks before the snow came. So they have to deal with it. And then the same way, when the snow leaves and they are still here and they turn, we could say, well, spring's coming, but, and then here this spring, it went right into summer.
Yep.
But we learn from, and again, those rabbits we call wapoos, they teach us about change. In other words, we have no control, but we better figure out what we're going to do with this hand we've been dealt. And I think with everything, with climate change and these environmental disasters, we got to figure it out. And it's Mother Earth giving us that little nudge with all those elements, whether it's air, the earth with the earthquakes, the fire, the water. We're getting lessons, and hopefully we're listening.
We're listening. We have some questions from the audience, and I want to share some with you. I think this is an important question because I think as an Indigenous person, this happens. But somebody wants to know, what is the biggest challenge of bringing your traditional knowledge of Indigenous ways into the contemporary workplace?
Well, one of the challenges is Indigenous people are human beings. And, we come with a whole set of backgrounds, culture, knowledge, perspectives. In the same way, diversity and inclusion says there's many people who have different stories. And how do they feel? How do we feel safe, comfortable? Because systemic racism is all around us. Those microaggressions and the words people use, and to have the courage to speak up. So it's always a challenge. And if you're the sole Indigenous person, people expect that you know everything about everything. And you may be a product of intergenerational trauma through residential schools. You might also have the trauma of being part of a 60s scoop, so you know nothing about your own culture and who you are. And yet they're saying, can we do this? Can we do that? And I know one Indigenous, First Nations woman says, and just because you show me a paper and you want me to read it, doesn't mean that's consultation.
Yep.
I said, and that happens too. And again, sometimes this is the head saying, gotta get it done, gotta get it done, gotta get it done. Other than to say, let's start hiring, for diversity. We know our workplace looks pretty, uniform. And if we really want to be creative and innovative, we got to bring different ways of thinking, different belief systems, different perspectives into the workplace. And, you know, how do we hire? And this I'm talking for non-Indigenous. How do we hire? How do we, you know, choose the right person? And, you know, I've seen organizations that they say we're going to hire in pairs or hire, you know, 3 at a time, 4 at a time, because you're not going to feel safe if you're the only one who's supposed to have all the knowledge and answers. So that's one of the challenges. And the other one then is just to get to know people, you know, and to see that, you know, we like to have fun. We like, you know, we have families, you know, we have our homes, we look after aging parents, all of those things. And so how do we support each other and welcome people into the workplace? And it was interesting. I was just going to say, but I went up to the gold mine, and it's an Australian mining company that's the joint venture. And before you can go on the mine site, you have to have an orientation. So this guy is telling me all about working with the local Tahltan Nation and what it's like to work with Indigenous peoples and the do's and don'ts. And then he looked at me and he says, I guess you could probably tell me more about this than these 5 slides that I... So...
You know what? One of the things that I remember learning from you that was so impactful to me was talking about mentorship one time. And you said to me, you know, if you don't have young people as mentors, you're doing it wrong. I went, wow, that's really profound, because I think when we think of mentorship, we think of it as a top-down phenomenon, right? At least in the Western.
Yeah.
Business sector, that, you know, a mentor is someone who's got a lot of experience and they grunt it down. And yet you disrupted that. You were like, no, mentorship is all around. Would you talk about that a little bit for the folks in the audience?
Yes, yeah, because how are you going to learn? How are you, you know, if I need help with my phone, you know, it might not be a mentor relationship, but if I have a good relationship with a younger person, I'm going to learn all kinds of things, and they'll just say, here, give it to me. Done. I'm like, huh? I was pretty nasty to those around me last night as I was trying to do this. But it's really about who's in your circle. Does your circle of friends look like you, that you all share the same things, likes, dislikes, politics, if you will, you know, you go to the same club. Think of that diversity and what you can learn from, you know, a first-year student, you know, and sometimes it's like, what are the challenges of learning? Well, you know, I don't get it when you do this, and you're thinking, so why do I do this? You know, but again, so I would challenge everyone in the audience to think about who's their mentor, maybe who do they mentor, and they don't even know they're mentoring it. But it might be someone at work that you go for coffee with, and just get to know them a little bit better. And then you find out they're, you know, they were a top soccer player, you know, in the country that they came from. And, you know, it's just like, wow. And how could you use that genius in the workplace? So, you know, everyone is a potential mentor to you. And also to don't hold your own, you know, light thinking, what do I have to offer? Maybe it's the kindness of just saying, come for coffee with me. And they go, me? You're asking me? Yeah. And it's just, it's amazing. And it's, I don't know, it just provides such growth and warmth. If you want to say, I'm grateful for this day, what did I do that was good today? Well, I'll have to say, today on National Indigenous Peoples Day, I was walking the dog and there were two women having a cigarette, and I just sat down. They turned out they were sisters from Fort McPherson in the Northwest Territories. And they said, after all this rain, we just got to sit outside. And so we sat and chatted. And I walked away thinking, well, that was really good. I just feel lighter and brighter. And all of a sudden, some of the other challenges that I've had, they're not there anymore. I've resolved them. So they might not be ongoing mentors, but they helped me in that moment. And, it wasn't in my diary to do that. So again, this is part of that magic.
That's funny that we come back to magic, because there is another question related to magic, and I just have to go back to the meeting chat. Somebody has asked, the question, I'll read it directly. Create space for magic to happen. I was meant to hear that. Thank you, Karen. Do you practice formal mindfulness in order to be so grounded?
Well, I'm going to say yes, but I might not call it mindfulness, but it is. So, I start my day I'll say in prayer, just lying in bed saying, oh, I'm alive. I'm grateful. My late father said, it's a good day when you wake up on the green side of the dirt. And so it's just start that day to start with that positive or that attitude of gratitude. That's some card there. And then you get out of bed, and I haven't looked at my phone. I might have looked at my phone just to see what the temperature is, because I'm going to go walk the dog. And then, I smudge, and then I just sit quietly with my tea or coffee. And just empty my mind. And just to be grateful for that cup of coffee and so on. And then all of a sudden thoughts will start coming in about what I'm going to be doing that day. But it will have also given me, this is where the magic comes in, that, wow, I could do this too. Or, maybe I should invite this person to something. So again, it's not always thinking ahead, got to do this, got to do that. Yes, that's all part of it, but just taking each moment to just feel grounded. And, with granddaughters visiting, it's like, whoa, I open the door at 6:00 with the dog, and there's two little girls standing there saying, can we walk the dog with you? And, that's a simple answer. But again, it's when you start noticing everything that's happening, it's you're bringing it into the consciousness. Too often that we just get into a routine. And sometimes I would challenge people, if you drive to work or walk to work, just go a different way once in a while. And you'll find that alertness, because it's not a routine anymore, will help you.
That's great. We have, I think we're still good. We've got about 10 minutes left. And there was some other questions. I think I can already predict a little bit of the answer, but I'm going to share this. Question: are you saying that a business plan must come from the heart before considering any risk management?
Well, I'm going to say, I don't think in a linear way, so step one, step two, it's all going to happen. And, from my perspective, just start. And it'll start with an idea about a product or a service.
Mm-hmm.
And then how do you start to put it in a plan? Well, oftentimes you think of some of the small Indigenous businesses start,
Mm-hmm.
at the kitchen table.
Yep.
They don't have a business plan per se, but they know the basics. I make something, I sell it, I can buy more beads or flour or whatever, and do that. So, and then as they start to say, oh, okay, now that people like my stuff, if I have to go to different markets, I'm going to need transportation, and on and on. So again, the risk is all in there,
Mm-hmm.
but it may just have a different starting point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And certainly you can download business plan templates on the internet and fill it in, but you have to have the idea. You have to have the passion, and that's where the heart piece comes in.
Yes.
The risk assessment and the how much and how long, that'll come later. I mean, it wouldn't exist. It wouldn't even be a question to be answered if you didn't have the passion to do something.
Mm-hmm.
What if I could do this kind of, how to make this work and so on. So, the short answer is you need both. Mm-hmm. And I like to think of a business plan as like a bowl, and you're putting things into it, and you're going to make sense of it. Mm-hmm. Or think of it as a buffet. What do you end up putting on your plate?
Yes.
And why did you put it on your plate?
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that's maybe also the brilliance of the circle, because the circle teaches you those things will happen, but you have to revisit those things too. Like if the world is always changing and you are in the circle, then you're always thinking through those things and processing them again and again and again. I think that's the wisdom of the circle.
Yeah. And I mean, businesses fail.
Yep.
And sometimes they fail because we didn't consider something, when you didn't consider the pandemic, and you were very structured, and you're having a hard time dealing with closed doors, and other people started businesses during the pandemic.
I think of Mallory.
And I was just I got a lift the other day, and from the son-in-law of my friend, the mother, and we're driving down the street, and he starts to laugh, and he says, "This is where I had my first date with your daughter during the pandemic." Yeah. And he said it was in this big parking lot that food trucks came. Mm-hmm. And you could, you had to practice the distancing and so on. And he said we had never met, but here we are. And some of these food trucks were, brick and mortar restaurants that closed their door. They went to a food truck. Other people started in a food truck. Or there was a collective truck where different people could share it. And so there was all of these. And so now at the end of the pandemic, what's happening is, so again, that innovation and that creative spirit, and also the relationships that you've had
exactly.
will help. My youngest daughter has her own business, and she's an urban prairie gardener. And, I keep thinking, and I'm saying, what about your business plan? And she's doing it, but not in quite the formal way. But she's got things happening that, like she planted 1,000 tulip bulbs, we'll say. And so the flowers, she has subscriptions and so on. Where am I going with this? She's just open to opportunities. So she went to Calgary to look about flower installations they had so much fun that the woman invited her to be her helper at this garden in New Jersey. That's like, looks like something out of Versailles. This is just this. And while she was there, there's a florist from Brooklyn who says, will you come and stay with me for a month?
Oh my gosh.
Because I need someone to help me plant a rooftop garden. And so again, if she had said, well, it's not in my business plan, she would miss both of those opportunities. You know, her business plan might have included the flower installations, but once she did that and stepped into that, all of these other things started happening.
The magic.
The magic.
This time has gone so fast. It always does with you, though. I think, and it's magic. Again, that's the key word for tonight. I hope everybody walks away with magic. But I'm conscious of our time, and I want to say thank you so much for chatting with us. And I also want to put in another plug that I hope that you will come to Brock. I'm still going to work on that. Because I would love for all of the folks who are listening to be able to experience the medicine wheel teachings and get to be with Karen. I think is such a magical gift. So thank you so much for being here tonight. And shenanigans soon.
If it's not magic, it's shenanigans, but maybe they go together, you know.
They do. So.
And I want to say thank you. This has been a joy. I'm so grateful that, you know, when I thought, oh my God, my granddaughters that I haven't seen for 5 years, and you said, we'll do it virtually. I thought, well, that was easy. You know? And so here we are, and I look forward to meeting you again in person. I'm talking about the audience, and I would challenge you to say, what's one thing I can do differently after I walk away? You know, it's and one thing I'm going to do, I don't know if it's different, but I'm going to commit to coming to Brock and sharing these teachings because it's amazing. So
thank you so much.
I'm grateful for this time that I've spent with you, my dear friend, and to meet the audience, even though they can see me and I can't see them. But, you know, the challenge is to think about business in a slightly different way and to think about the motivation. Why do you do what you do? What do you love about what you do?
Yep, exactly. I now have the honor of introducing one of our students, Aidan Walmsley. He is a current fourth-year student at the Goodman School of Business, and I welcome Aidan to this conversation.
Thanks, Robyn. I appreciate it. I actually just want to say thank you, take a moment to thank you, Robyn, and Karen for joining us this evening for our Indigenous Speaker Series and ultimately sharing your stories, your knowledge, and educating us during National Indigenous Peoples Day. Thank you as well to Daniel and Pravneek for supporting this event, and thank you to the audience as well for being attentive and contributing your questions. Ultimately, this event has been a great opportunity to expand our knowledge of our Indigenous peoples and understand, how we can be a beneficial or supportive force in the community, but also there's a few takeaways that I think we've all kind of attributed from this conversation today. Too many to encapsulate in a conclusion speech, but I do want to say one thing I really appreciated was the conversation about the importance of listening with the intention to actually learn and understand. And it's not always about taking notes. That's only a small part of your interaction. There's actual magic that kind of comes out when you have a real conversation. So as Karen described, you have to find your magic and appreciation in life without the distraction, even in the face of uncertainty. Another point I really appreciated was when we were speaking about in Western society, how we view relationships in kind of a hierarchical fashion, where the Indigenous perspective would be to view it or describe it as a circle where all voices are accounted for and recognized. And within the circle, diversity and inclusion is interwoven into making the stakeholders feel safe within that circle. So ultimately, In closing, I want to say today's conversation was not merely a celebration of heritage, but it was also a reminder to recognize the challenges faced by our Indigenous communities, and that we also need to forge a future that upholds their rights and their dignity as well as aspirations. So thank you for everyone for joining, and I appreciate this conversation today.
Hi, Kevin Asperton. I'm grateful.